My name is Terrence Brown. I am the Zone 2 Director, and I'll be hosting the February Power Hour. So thank you all for joining. Excited about this evening's speakers, and just wanted to, give a quick background as we thought about, the importance of NPhA, what we do, what we offer, and who we are. Thought it was really important during this month of February as we celebrate Black History Month, given some of the climate surrounding us, really highlighting the significance and importance of organizations such as ourselves. So we're going to have three different speakers this evening, and a little bit of a format, I guess, explanation, just so everyone will know. Each speaker will share, and then we'll have a few minutes after each one for Q&A. And then at the end, we will have some more time for questions, discussion, and some announcements from the organization. So I am going to get out of the way. Dr. King, are you ready?
Yes, I
And
am, Dr. Brown.
turn it over to you as you feel led. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's always an honor and a privilege when I am among my associates, my colleagues, my inspiration, called the National Pharmaceutical Association. You've asked me to speak about my experience. I guess it's because I'm probably one of the most oldest practitioners around. So maybe I have learned something over these years, but I've also experienced something as well. So Dr. Brown asked me to focus on what I knew during the first 50 years. And I shaped it in this way. I told him I would speak first about how I came to know about NPhA. And then secondly, I told him that I would very easily talk about the historical context at that time and the national presence of NPhA as I saw it. And lastly, the third point about what I see as the continuing significance of NPhA. As many of you know, I finished pharmacy school in 1962. So I'm not a spring chicken, but I have been blessed by God to still be here to say something and to add from my experience. I was asked to work at the Watts Health Center. I joined Watts Health Center, which was at that time a federally funded OEO meaning Office of Economic Opportunity Health Center on 103rd Street in Watts, Los Angeles. I was asked to be the senior pharmacist by the gentleman, Mr. Grayson, who was putting the pharmacy together. And he thought I had some energy and interest to bring. And I told him, well, I really like being a pharmacist, and I would do everything I possibly could to make a contribution. I worked there from 67 to 69. And in 1969, the early part of it, one of the speakers of APHA, Mary Louise Anderson, was making a tour, and she wanted to come visit the health center. And she did, and I cornered her about what was APHA doing and why did we have to go through all of this if APHA was so strong at the time. Well, she got back at me in a sense by persuading Bill Apple, who was then the executive director of the American Pharmacists Association, to extend an invitation for me to come and join a newly funded project at APHA. This was during the time of the War on Poverty, the Johnson War on Poverty. The Watts Health Center was one of the first 8 health centers created in the country. And American Pharmacists Association, at that time, the American Pharmaceutical Association, had received a grant to outline how pharmaceutical services could be articulated within those health centers. It was called the Delivery of Pharmacy Services in Poverty Areas. All of the health centers were in poverty areas. And so I was the third pharmacist to join in 1969, and that's how I became the first African American pharmacist employee at NPhA. As soon as I got to Washington, D.C., I said, well, now I know I'm not the only one. I know D.C. at that time was called Chocolate City. Let me make some outroads here, some outreach, and see who else is here. Well, of course, Howard was there, and Howard was my first stop. Within, I think, about a month or two after I landed at the job, I had the honor and the privilege to meet directly Dr. Chauncey Cooper. He sat me down and he said, well, now listen, young lady, I don't know what you think you're going to do, but we can probably work together. We can probably do some things together. And we did. And that's how I found out about the National Pharmaceutical Association. Having been a pharmacist in New York, having been a pharmacist where I was trained initially in Pittsburgh, having been a pharmacist in California, no one had spoken to me of the National Pharmaceutical Association. That's how I found out about the association. That's how I found out about the beauty and the strength of the association. That's how I found out about the solidity, the solidarity of the association at that time. And as we at NPhA began to put together strategies and techniques and tactics, rather, on putting together pharmacy services within the neighborhood health centers around the country, one of the persons that I often interacted with was Dean Cooper. But it was amazing. At that time, Howard University School of Pharmacy was the only school of pharmacy in Washington, D.C. It remains so till this day. The George Washington School of Pharmacy had folded a few months before I got there. And NPhA acted as though it never existed. And I just never could really understand that, especially when it touted as representing all of the pharmacists of the United States. And I knew that the pharmacists from Howard and those who looked like me were not necessarily a part of what they called all. But that was the time of the civil rights era. That was also the time that pharmacy was going through its own changes. Many of you remember that in the early days, pharmacists never talked to patients about their medications. Never, which is a very distinct difference from today. If the patient had any question, we could talk about the ingredients. We could talk about what the ingredients did, but in terms of how it affected their care, that was almost forbidden. I wondered why that was in those days. And so when at the OEO Health Center, I said, we as a team should be working together as a healthcare team. And the persons at the healthcare center were brave enough to listen to me. And so we were able to pull together, before I got to NPhA, a model of the pharmacist as a member of the healthcare team. And as I pulled that together, I was able to begin to inculcate that within the model that NPhA was developing. And thanks to the blessings of Dr. Cooper and some of the other faculty members, I could use them as a sounding board to be sure that I wasn't too far off course. That's how I got into NPhA. That was the context for my involvement at that time with NPhA. The next point I wanted to address was what I see as what I call the national presence of NPhA at that time. NPhA, although it was right in the heart of Washington, D.C., was not called upon, as was NPhA, to issue policy statements, proclamations of various kinds, to talk in terms of the advancements in the practice, etc. which we talk about routinely now. But at that time, NPhA was not that intimately involved. And it was not because they did not want to or could not have contributed greatly to the discussion, but it was the way the society operated in those days. So I'm talking now in the 70s. I left Washington to go back to California in the early 70s because I wanted to further my own education. But NPhA, I later learned, well, not then, before I left DC, had such a strong presence around the country that you could not go anywhere to any place and meet a Black pharmacist who did not know of other Black pharmacists and of NPhA. And that was due to the communication strategy that Cooper and his colleagues had put together in the structuring of NPhA. And to me, that is something that I see that's blooming today. It's blossoming today. It has been a bit undercover, but it is blossoming. And since I have been able to get retired and return back to service, I've seen more and more. So I want to continue to encourage the national presence of NPhA. A few years ago, pharmacy during the COVID pandemic wanted to put out a statement about what pharmacists could and couldn't do during COVID. And as usual, they still weren't necessarily going to include NPhA officers. Well, I think it was Dr. Butler who wrote a letter and who encouraged that participation. And I encouraged her to do so. And in that encouragement, I just personally called the head of ASHP and APHA and said, look, you cannot make a statement and not have NPHA's representative a part of it. It will be an incomplete statement and it will be a false statement if you make it. But there was a turnaround. And it's necessary, it's very necessary that that kind of staunch stand be continued by NPhA. I know a few years ago, there was a discussion about NPhA and SNPhA separating. Oh, if you only knew the foundational issues that emerged when SNPhA was being founded. You heard John Scrivens a few years ago address them. Well, some of you may or may not know that John Scrivens, Sharon Rockmore, and I worked closely together. I could not outwardly say I was helping to form SNPhA because I was at that time an employee of APHA. But we could collaborate in the evenings, on the weekends, or whatever, put our heads together. And as my Nigerian friends would say, we could rub minds so that the task in front of us could be accomplished. Well, I know I'm just going on and on. I should have made a more definitive presentation, but I just wanted to share from my heart those points that I thought might be useful for your own consideration. Because NPhA, to me, has a strength and a beauty that needs to be nourished, that needs to be cherished, that needs to be strengthened, where some may feel it is weak, and needs to blossom. I have even encouraged NPhA to take even a more global role, because what NPhA is doing, its members, is not done anywhere else in the United States. There's no other group in the United States, if you look at the whole long list, that is concerned with our concerns and our way of serving our patients. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I hope I have just covered a few points that you may or may not have known before, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you again for the honor, for the privilege of being a part of this association, and I will continue to do whatever I can as long as the Lord keeps me here on this earth. And next year I'll be 87, and I'm so thankful. thank you all for listening to me. I hope I'm helpful. God bless you.
Oh, excuse me. No, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. King. I think whatever you may have wanted to do in formality, I think was explained through the passion that you always bring whenever we're blessed to hear you speak. And if there are any questions, I will gladly field those and pass them to Dr. King. There weren't really any in the chat, kind of a comment question from Madam President. Um, and Dr. King, I don't know if you are in the chat, but there are lots of thank yous and love coming your way, appreciation. So we will go ahead and give that to you now. So if you're not in there, please take a look and see, um, what everybody has to say.
Thank you. Was there a question? Did you say there was a question? Someone had
I think it was just more of a comment about APHA acting like Howard didn't exist in the 70s. I don't know if it's
oh
something
yeah.
you can expand upon or give more detail.
Well, when as you know, when APHA held its meetings, there was a House of Delegates. The lady who came out to speak to me that encouraged Bill Apple to hire me was the first female speaker of the House of Delegates. And there were no people in the House of Delegates when I first I attended as a staff member of APHA that looked like me. And I said, that's impossible. That was, to me, proof positive that there had been very little interaction, if any. And Howard was not even 10 miles away from APHA headquarters. You all know that APHA headquarters on Constitution Avenue is the only non-governmental building on Constitution Avenue. It's a privately owned building. And so you can, if you were a runner and you're doing a marathon, a half marathon would take you to Howard from APHA. So I could not understand that. And it was a very difficult time because there was that absence, that voice that we bring was not there. And so even though the speaker knew, but somehow she could not move the association to do very much. It changed over the years, and it's different now. Thank goodness.
Indeed, a couple other questions did come in.
Uh-huh.
And one of the questions is, what were the sentiments of our non-Black counterparts about the work of NPhA? Were they supportive or anything like that?
Well, it's funny how the non-Black mind works sometimes. It has a capacity to minimize and dismiss, even when they're looking at something that is significant or monumental. And it was that kind of interaction that I saw. As far as I could see, um, when we would talk about NPhA and ask for their participation, it was almost as though it was an invisible organization at that time.
Okay, thank you. That is interesting, but I guess we can not necessarily color ourselves surprised about that one.
No.
So this is one says, did APHA really use blackface for entertainment back in the day during Jim Crow?
I talked to Dr. Clark about that. You all know Dr. John Clark in Florida. He is, in my mind, a preeminent historian of Black pharmacy, no matter what aspect you wish to consider. And when I talked to him about that, it was his opinion that no, they did not, nor could he find any direct, overt evidence that NPhA actively discriminated against Black pharmacists. It was just just Black pharmacists and Black pharmacy was seen as just an invisible entity.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get to one more, and some of these other questions I'll make note of, and we'll circle back to at the end. So the next one that came in was, is there still a need for NPhA now that we are quote unquote accepted by others, and if so, why?
Well, I don't know that we are fully accepted by others, pardon me, if I may be so bold. You look at the list of pharmacy organizations, just Google. Is NPhA included? Is NPhA on the list? I think I went to US Pharmacists not too long ago, and they were listing all the pharmacy organizations, but I did not see NPhA. So it's a matter I probably want to make sure that I bring to our current president. But I am not sure that we are, quote unquote, accepted. I now don't know, to be honest, that we need to be accepted. What we need to do is to be sure that we have an articulated strategy for caring for the underserved, and we go about implementing that strategy. And if the others wish to catch up with it, fine. But I don't think that acceptance should be a part of our target of operation or a goal. You're muted. You're muted, Dr. Brown.
Yes, I'm coming back on. Thank you so very much for that. Again, that sentiment and for, giving us that voice and that experience and everything that you bring beyond that. Um, I'm making note of the other questions that came in, and we will get back to those. But we're going to keep it moving with our second speaker, Dr. Maxwell. I will turn the reins over to you if you are ready to go.
Yes. Great evening, everybody. Before I get started, I got to shout out like three people in here. I see one of my old, I ain't gonna say old, one of my classmates from pharmacy school in SNPhA is in here. Dr. Tate is here, and excited. I don't see her, but I see her name. So me and her started out in SNPhA as P1s, and so very excited about her. Also, I see some of my old board members from NPhA and SNPhA, Trish and Lynn, and Gail. I feel like I'm missing somebody, but I want to make sure that I recognize them because they were always big supporters of mine, during my time as president of both organizations. And so I just much appreciate it for them being in here this evening. But I want to go ahead and move on and make sure that I give Dr. Christian enough time so that she has, I'm certain that she has some great words of wisdom for us. But I want to kind of talk a little bit tonight just about my journey through. If you just, all I need is about 10 minutes, and then we'll be ready to move. And so I'm supposed to be talking about the present when it comes to this organization. And I'm in this place where I'm able to kind of talk about a bridge because I've been a part of either SNPhA or NPhA for 21 years and a certain leadership in that time. I those 21 years for like 16 or 17 between SNPhA, NPhA, and the foundation. So I got a lot of perspective about, things within the organization, but, I think there's some themes that I really want to talk about within the org and how moving from, past and into the present and things, how we set ourselves up for the future. So I kind of want to start at the beginning for me, for my journey when I was SNPhA president. and Terrence can tell you this because he was on the board of NPhA when I was there. As many of you guys know me, you guys have seen me in a much more polished and professional manner, but I was a big fire breather when I came in. I had a lot of ideas, and if you got in my way, it was very probable that you were going to get burned. But one of the things that I just didn't allow to happen to me is that I just did not want to be shackled. I did not want to be held up by things just because they had been done in a certain way. No matter what it was, I had to have a good explanation for why things were done the way that they were done. Like it wasn't good enough for you to tell me this is how we've always done it. That's never has been, never will be an answer that I will accept. So that's what makes me a good clinical pharmacist, is that I have to practice evidence-based medicine. You have to give me some evidence on why we do things. And so one of the things that, for me, in regards to leadership lessons that I've taught and thought about over the years, beginning in my time at SNPhA president, was that past is prologue, which means that, a lot of things, the things that happened in the past have set you up for where you're at right now. But past is prologue, but it doesn't have to be predestiny. Predestiny means that there's nothing that you can do based on the things that have happened to you in the past. And so a lot of times we get caught up and held up in a fact that we think that because past is prologue, that it's our predestiny. And it doesn't have to be like that. We can use the past as a way to be able to see, hey, what have we done? Where have we come from? But it doesn't have to lock us into the things that we're going to do in the future. We have to look at, what are things that we have done so far to be able to use that to make appropriate judgment for where we're going. And so that was a big thing of mine when I was SNPhA president, is that I wanted to make sure that where we were going was great, where we had been was great. But where we were going, we had to do things a little bit different. And so, it was just very important for me to be able to not be held back just because of things that have been done in the past. It is important to understand why things were done. And so one of the things from a leadership standpoint, I always talk with and mentor leaders, residents, whoever, is, when you come in, always understand why certain things were done. Never assume that it was done for a bad reason. Never assume there was no reason for it to be done. Go find out why it happened, because a lot of times there was a real good reason for people to do what they did. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes that's just what they were comfortable with. But a lot of times there was a really good reason. So the reason that you have to understand why things happened in the past is because you have to be able to explain your rationale for change. And people are not going to get on board with you from a change aspect, from an aspect of what you're trying to do, if you can't give a good, strong, rational explanation for why you want to change it in the first place. And so always want to make sure when we're looking at it from a leadership standpoint, understanding why we did things, because if you want to change it, you need to have a great explanation for why you want to change it, which kind of brings me to my time as NPhA president. This was 2014 to 2016. I walked in the office, and some of the big things that we were doing, the big things that we were doing at that time were convention and getting ready for the next convention. And those were things that we had to deal with. Had to make sure that the bills were paid, the lights were on, convention would go, and then we kind of plan a little bit, get ready for the next convention. And I looked at the organization. I had been an officer for 4 or 5 years, and I knew I wanted to do things different. And so when I looked at it, and the thing that kept coming back to me, and it was a theme that I used for my 2 years, was a new foundation. And one of the things from a leadership standpoint that is particularly leaders who know that they don't have an infinite amount of time, or their time is very limited, is they're very afraid of breaking things down to the studs because they don't believe that they're going to see the fruits of that labor during their time. And I encourage people that if you see it and if it needs to be broken down, then you do that. Do not be afraid to start over. It's okay if you have to start over. There's nothing wrong with starting over. If you see that that's the best way to move forward, sometimes you have to take one step back in order to go two steps forward. And so it is extraordinarily important to not be afraid to start over. That's one of the things that I really broke down during my 2 years, is that I really everything and questioned every single thing that we did and decided that we're going to build this up so that other people can stand on a better foundation for what we had. The things that had gone on previously from the organization were awesome. Like, I have all the respect in the world for the leaders who came before me, the presidents who came before me. But we were just at a moment where we were fork in the road. We had to go in a new direction, and that happens sometimes. And I think the biggest things that hold leaders back from that is you don't believe you're going to see the fruits of that labor. And I want to challenge leaders to let go of that ego, because that's what that is. When you're saying that you don't have enough time to be able to see that through, what you're saying is you want to take the credit. And you've got to understand that the organization has been around for almost 78 years, 77, 78 years. And the organization is going to be around. The organization was here before you were, most of us. And the organization is going to be here after all of us. Lord willing, the creek don't rise. And so you've got to be able to let go of that ego and say that I'm willing to do something, and somebody else may get the full credit for what I started. And that's the true measure of a leader, how much you love the organization enough to where you're able to invest in it without getting the full credit for it, which leads me to my last point. Now, being, a NPhA Foundation Executive Director, but also an advisor for this board. And me and Dr. McCants text back and forth all the time. And sometimes she doesn't ask me to text her, but I text her when I think she needs a little bit of perspective about certain things, just give her a thought, like, hey, have you thought about it this way? Have you looked at it from this angle? And to her credit, whether she agrees with me or not, she always says that she appreciates my perspective. She's willing to listen to things, to the thoughts that I have. She may go in a different direction. That's fine. She has that right as the president of the organization. But the one thing that I try to talk a lot with this board is about making sure that you understand that everything that you do matters. Every brick matters is the phrase that I like to use. And so some of us, when I talked about foundations, on a house, you don't see the foundation. Okay, you see the outside, you see the exterior, you see the bricks, you see the paint, you see the windows, you see the roof. But you got to think about it like somebody had to put all that together. And every single part of that matters. Doesn't matter how good a foundation is if you don't have siding. It doesn't matter the siding if you don't have a good roof. It doesn't matter about the roof if you don't have electricity. It doesn't matter about the electricity if you don't have heating and plumbing. All of these things go together to make the house what it is. And so for us as leaders, it's us as people who are building, this foundation, building this organization and continuing to build on it. We've got to understand that every single brick matters, no matter how big or small the brick is. No matter how big or small, you might just put a shingle on the roof. Somebody else might put the windows in. Somebody else, might put a little bit of paint and touch up. But all of it matters. So we've got to understand to do the best thing that we can with the tools that we have, the abilities that we have, in the time that we have. If we can do that and leave it better for somebody else to continue the work, that's what's going to push the organization forward. So those are the things from my perspective, looking at it from a present standpoint. We're doing a lot of great things right now, but a lot of that is because of actions that others took in order to allow the organization to get to this point. Because the organization right now is doing events on a monthly basis. The organization is putting out joint statements. The organization is attending JCPP. The organization is doing podcasts. There's some great things that the organization is doing, but it started with making sure the bills were paid. And then, okay, let's put out, position statements. And Dr. Butler started, doing podcasts and making sure that we got joint statements with other people. And then somebody else, made sure, Dr. Mirabal got our financial situation in strong order. Dr. North got us with a lot of, great partnerships with other organizations. People before me, had things, made sure that we were in an appropriate place. So every brick matters. And that's one of the things that I really want us to remember, as leaders. And so I think I went a little bit over my time, but I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk with you for just a little while. And hopefully this leads into kind of what Dr. Christian wants to talk about with the future of NPhA. So I appreciate your time, and I'm going to give Dr. Brown back the floor so that he can moderate.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Maxwell, for bringing us through that time frame, and some of the changes and things that you saw and experienced and were a part of, and for the lessons in leadership as well. There's a question in the chat, and I believe Dr. King just raised her hand. So I'm gonna go ahead get this question, and then I'll get you, Dr. King. Okay. So this one came in. It says, from a leadership perspective, what do you see as NPhA's biggest or consistent obstacle area for improvement? And then also our greatest asset that will help propel the association mission forward, especially in this climate.
I think I got an answer, but I would love to hear Dr. King's answer too. So I'm going to answer this, but I actually want to hear Dr. King's answer on this too. For me, I think the biggest obstacle that we have is that I think it's a big issue for us, and I want to be cool when I say this. We don't believe, and when I say we, as minority pharmacists, I don't believe that we have enough belief in how we can impact things. And therefore, that translates into the level of membership that we have as an organization. Because it's thousands of, African-American minority pharmacists, but I know what the membership numbers are. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's a little bit of lack of belief in the fact that if we all pull together, like, we can make some great things happen. Some of that has to do with the fact of how fragmented pharmacy is in general, because we don't do a good job as pharmacists of talking about what we can do. But then when you start drilling down further, it gets even less impactful. And so I think, to me, that is one of the things, that is the biggest consistent obstacle, because if you can get over that, you get people more excited about the organization, more membership in the organization, and the organization be able to do a lot more.
Thank you. Dr. King, you raised your hand. I don't know if you want something on that question.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Actually, I was trying to clap for what Dr. Maxwell was saying, wrong button. But I will say to him that I loved the model that he used, because every brick matters, and each pharmacist, wherever we practice, is a part of building the house. And so I just wanted to congratulate him on that. and say that the biggest asset I see of the association is each pharmacist and the leadership that can develop a cohesive strategy of operations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Let me see here. Just check real quick. Got a question, one more question for you. Um, it says, what is Dr. Maxwell, what is the best way to develop the next group of leaders?
Um, that's a good question. I think from a development standpoint, I think it's twofold. Number one, you got to give them an opportunity to lead. So, we have to develop opportunities for people to lead. And I think we've done a good job of that with the committees that we've developed, within the foundation, excuse me, not the foundation, the within NPhA, to give people opportunities to get their feet in the door. And so, I've appreciated listening to the NPhA, the New Practitioner Network leaders. I've appreciated listening to, the convention planning committee. Like, these are people who are just getting their feet in the door in leadership, but it's gonna translate. And so I started out, on the board, as my first thing in SNPhA was a community service chair. Went from community service chair to the national president. Got back on the board as the Speaker of the House, did the website for a year, and then did president-elect. And so all these things like matter. So just giving them the opportunity, but also mentorship is extraordinarily important. And people being accepting of mentorship is very important, because we don't know everything. And you got to have some real good, strong mentors. I've had some great mentors. Dr. King would hit me up when I was president and give me advice, solicited or unsolicited. But I always listened because I knew she had my best interest in mind. Terrence, talked to Terrence for long hours during the second half of my presidency about just things that were going on, and he gave me some great advice. So mentorship is extraordinarily important as well.
Yes, certainly. And we have a comment in here, I think that echoing that sentiment from
And
the other
it's crazy
Terrence.
because like he wrote that comment, I didn't read that. So for him to write that, and like it's funny because I that is just a very true comment. Like it's just extraordinarily accurate.
Indeed. Go ahead and give Dr. Christian the floor. And make sure, let's see, got slides coming up. Dr. Christian, take it away.
All right, so you can see the slides and you can hear me. Awesome. Thank you so much. So coming after these giants, Dr. King and Dr. Maxwell, I just feel honored to be here today and being asked to speak by you, Terrence. So thank you so much for inviting me. If you look at the screen, you see a flower that has blossomed, and Dr. King had mentioned that blossoming. So this flower has blossomed, and the only reason that we can experience the beauty and the benefits of this flower is because of the seeds that were planted by someone else. So again, thank you to those who spoke before me and everything that you did to make NPhA what it is today. My name is Robbie Christian, and I am the SNPhA Executive Director, and I was the Assistant Executive Director under Dr. Kimberly Lewis, an executive consultant at SNPhA for a few years when I was in residency. I'm in the National Vice President of SNPhA right after I had graduated in 2016. And today I was tasked to talk about the future under the umbrella of power of purpose. So before I do so, I want to just give the Oxford definition of purpose. So purpose is the reason for something being done or created, or for something to exist. And I wanted to start off with that because of the existence of SNPhA and NPhA and the mission that SNPhA and NPhA has. So just so we're all on the same page, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but NPhA's mission, so NPhA is dedicated to representing the views and ideals of minority pharmacists on critical issues that is affecting healthcare and pharmacy, promoting racial and health equity, as well as advancing the standards of pharmaceutical care amongst practitioners. And SNPhA is an educational service association of pharmacy students who are concerned about the profession of pharmacy, healthcare issues, and the poor minority representation in these orders. So knowing that, I want to briefly talk about what happened in 1972, which Dr. King touched on. So first of all, 1947, NAPHA was founded. 32 years later, SNPhA was created on the campus of FAMU, which I knew the main two people being Sharon Rockmore and John J. Scrivens, but they had a consultant on the inside with Dr. King being there to give her guidance. And I would say what the purpose was to give the students a safe space to ask questions, to serve without any discrimination, and really to get their wounds licked throughout pharmacy school and to live that mission every day. And then having Dr. King on the call today saying that she's proud of the strides that we've made within SNPhA and NAPHA really does put a smile on my face to know that we are doing the work that we set out to do by the mission. The creation of the national organization did lead to several student chapters and various pharmacy schools, but starting off in HBCUs. So I'll take some time to just talk about the student chapters. Right now, SNPhA has 106 student chapters, and I'm focusing in on the students for right now because the students are the future. Without them becoming a part of NAPHA, doing the work, then things are lost. So there's 106 student chapters today, and the purpose of those chapters is really to take care of the communities that are traditionally overlooked and underserved, that are vulnerable. The students do a lot. So if you looked at any of the social media, they conduct blood pressure screenings, diabetes screenings, obesity screenings are coming soon, and then hopefully also social determinants of health screenings as well. And from our reporting system, last year alone, SNPhA members served over 130,000 patients in those communities, which was, I was just in awe of what all of these students can do, especially with thinking about the colleges of pharmacy and the numbers going down with applicants and maybe the numbers going down with people who are involved in organizations, but they were still able to make such an impact. And then as of yesterday, I just looked at the numbers. It was around 71,000 patients this year so far on this academic year, which is also amazing. I would say the first time that I recognized the purpose of SNPhA was in undergrad. So my plan was I was going to cure cancer. So I was at the University of Toledo and I was getting my bachelor's degree in pharmaceutical sciences. And while I loved it, at the end of my time, you had to do your internship, and we were just in a lab, and everybody's so focused on the cells that are being grown, and nobody wanted to talk in the lab. So I realized while that was my plan, that was not my purpose, which led me to apply to pharmacy school at LeCom Bradenton in Bradenton, Florida, and they did not have a SNPhA chapter. So I was like, okay, no, we definitely need a SNPhA chapter here. And I spent weeks working with administration trying to really convince them the purpose of SNPhA and how SNPhA really was different from all of the other organizations that were on campus. And they said, oh, well, we're worried about your grades of starting a chapter. You're in your, first year pharmacy school. But my question was, well, I'm 13th in my class of 150. I'm not worried about my grades. I won't let that slack. And that really grinded their gears that I was fighting for something that I believed in. And, yeah, the other organizations on campus had community service aspects. Yeah, the other organizations had the opportunity to network. But SNPhA really provided the service to those who needed it most. Like we went to the homeless shelters, we fed the poor, we educated our communities with dignity and respect that no other organization was willing to do. So finally winning that battle, I became the inaugural president for the LECOM chapter, and I'm so proud to see their growth today and their accomplishments over the years. And it's not only about the students giving and giving, but the students do give a lot, and they put a lot into what they do on a student level in their chapters. But it's also about receiving when you're a part of SNPhA and NAPHA, which brings me to my next point of mentorship. So, as you all know, NAPHA is the parent organization of SNPhA. Without NAPHA, It's a very high chance that SNPhA, as we know it today, wouldn't exist. So NPhA, under the advisement of Dr. Ryan Maribel, I believe, was the one to develop the Pharmacy Student Mentorship Program, or PSMP. You may know about the program, and you may even be a mentor. And if you are, thank you so much for your service and helping fulfill that purpose. I would say the purpose for us with this mentorship program was for our NPhA members and leaders to be mentors to the SNPhA members and leaders. And it was really well designed in the program. It has topics to discuss like each month what we're working on. So CV review, mock interviewing, I think imposter syndrome is just to name a few. But the program has been very successful for many years and it continues to grow, especially in the number of mentees. So we really do need to start working on making sure we're engaging more mentors. This program usually takes place in September, October, and you'll see emails go out from our combined website about asking for mentors. So please consider that in the future, because as Dr. Maxwell said and Terrence Burrows also echoed in the chat, mentorship is super important for the future of our organization, making sure that we have the resources and things that will really get us to the next level. Now, SNPhA is a pretty large organization with 3,000 members, and I think NPhA is a little under 1,000, which brings me to my last point on purpose. So growth is definitely important for our SNPhA members to all become NPhA members. So if you're on this call and you're a SNPhA member, you are a NPhA member. You just have to apply. So to give back to our profession by serving as a mentor or preceptor for health fairs is definitely beneficial. Or if you wanted to come to our regional and national conventions as speakers, or judges for competitions, or even donors for our endowment scholarships. I know we got a few more endowment scholarships, so I was excited to see those emails come through, or even donating for fundraising campaigns, and just continue to strengthen the profession by strengthening the most vulnerable. And when I say most vulnerable, I mean the vulnerable students, the most vulnerable patients, and the most vulnerable communities. Um, so what have we done so far in NPhA? So under the presidency of Dr. Frank North, we were able to combine the website, which was a lot of work on the back end, but we were able to get it done in a timely manner. And that helps us really make a seamless transition from our student members into new practitioners. And in our most updated bylaw as well, the change that happened in July will allow for free membership for new practitioners within that 5-year graduation time frame. We developed programming of CEs and soon to be a certificate program on social determinants of health to keep all of our members in NPhA engaged. We have expanded our partnerships that Dr. Maxwell talked about under Dr. Frank North, and we continue to expand them now with Dr. McCants. And we're on track for meeting some of our financial goals to make sure NPhA and SNPhA continues to be the premier organizations when it comes to promoting health equity, diversity, despite the current political climate that we're in. So we have so much great work that has been done. I'm sure we could all talk about some of the other aspects and things, but we do still have work to do. And the only way we can achieve our lofty goals is really with the support of everyone on this call. So who is going to be our next president-elect of SNPhA? Who's going to be our next president-elect of NPhA? Will you take the organization to the next level? Will you be bold enough to live with the power of purpose? And just to tie this up, the reason I believe knowing and living your purpose is so powerful is because no one can stand in your way of getting the work done when you know it's your purpose. It's like Kendrick Lamar said, it's in your DNA. And with that, I yield my time and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Christian, for bringing us with that timeline and really, helping us see how where we are right now and where we're going, continue to line up with our purpose and just the importance of that. Um, I'm looking in here. I did get a couple of questions that are going to be posed to um, all of our speakers. So if there are any questions that anyone would like to ask directly to Dr. Christian, I'll give a second if you want to put it in the chat. And in the meantime, what I will say is I think, we talked a lot about mentorship and the importance, and Dr. King spoke about having Dean Cooper and the staff and faculty at Howard there and available. And it really just makes me think about, just in general, the importance of community and that fellowship and that space to have someone to help you along the way, which is, something that we really can grow with as NPhA and SNPhA continue to grow further and more into alignment as an organization in that structure. Okay, so I don't see any questions directly. But one of the questions that came in for our speakers was, in these current times that we're in, how do we lead our organization, especially when there are others that would prefer we don't own the space we are in terms of advocating for the issues that impact people of color and related diseases or health conditions?
Okay, you want to go first?
I was trying to see that question in the chart, in the chat. Let me make sure I understand it properly. How do we stand on our purpose when there are others who think we should not stand on that purpose? Did I get that right, Dr. Brown? You're muted.
So let me see if I can. I think the question is, so in these current times that we're in, how do you recommend we lead our organization, especially when others that would prefer we don't own the space we are in? And I think it's really referencing, I think the seemingly a push to remove the Black identity from NPhA.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you remove who you are from being who you are? That to me would be the essential question. That's like saying, how do you remove a finger from your hand when you know you need it and it's a part of your hand? I don't think that's what we need to be really concerned about. Where we need to put our energy is on the positive, strategizing for what we know is our purpose and how that can be implemented as a group in our communities, and strategizing on how our voice can get stronger or more, I shouldn't say louder. I don't want to be just loud. I want to be effective in our voice and what we say. So to me, it's a matter of tactics. And those who say that we should be removing Black from our identity, they may themselves not fully understand what identity consists of, and therefore have a main question. And then, two, I must tell you, there's an element of jealousy sometimes, because some people see how we can come together and how we can be resilient, even in difficult times and against all kinds of obstacles. And they're not quite sure, how in the world did they do that? And they would like to knock it down. But my encouragement is not to let them, to keep your eye on the prize. And the prize with NPhA is that we now use the term minority. We didn't back then, we said Black. Then we evolved to African American, and then we evolved to minority. And you all know that the term minority really came into vogue in the 70s. It wasn't a major term in the lexicon English lexicon here in the US until the 70s. So those are my thoughts. It may seem a bit jumbled, but stay who you are. Stay in your purpose, stand in your purpose, and strengthen your stance in that purpose. Thank you.
Yeah, I think kind of to piggyback on what Dr. King said, I think it's important. You got to be able to be true to like your purpose. So you've always got to, the great organizations, the great businesses, all of them are very clear and stick to kind of what their mission, their vision, their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to be real clear about that. So for example, I'll give you two examples on both ends. So Rolls-Royce doesn't try to be everything to everybody.
That's right.
They make cars for a certain segment of the population. They do it very well. They're a very successful company. Okay. And so, they've never strayed from that particular aspect of like what their mission, vision, goals are. The YMCA, we know the YMCA is a gym for the most part. But the YMCA is Young Men's Christian Association, right? So the YMCA kind of got away from its own mission in order to quote unquote expand itself, but it lost its purpose in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
So it's extraordinarily important, like that you don't get so caught up in chasing the dollar that you miss what your actual like purpose and impact is, because you can get the money, but you ain't gonna get the purpose or the impact if you don't stay true to your values. So kind of just really coinciding with what Dr. King was talking about. I'd love to hear Dr. Christian's perspective on it.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So I think just being authentic and controlling what you can control. And then secondly, I work in the government right now, right? So it's a lot of things going on. They're taking diversity out, they're taking this out, take this question out. But I still will want my resident to represent diversity, for my program. So I still do the work. And even if it has a different language, even if it doesn't say exactly what I wanted to say, I know that I'm going to be authentic and who I'm looking for. So we need to be authentic as an organization. If we get threats to remove stuff, take things down, we can take the way of saying no, standing strong and saying absolutely not, we're not going to change it. Or we can make the adjustments and change what some of our wording for things, but still do the work that is most important.
Thank you. So, man, that is a really interesting, I guess, question, and the responses I think we're right on with what we needed to hear um in terms of remembering your purpose, your why, and you know why are you here in the first place? How did we get here? And it really makes me think a little bit about in Mississippi, our NPhA chapter, the Magnolia State Pharmaceutical Society, hosts a joint convention um, every year with other Black organizations, Magnolia Bar Association, Mississippi Dental Society, um, and the physicians group. And we ran into what were perceived to be some issues with sponsors and funding, and there was a concern that because the joint organization was called the Mississippi Black Professionals Association, that the name in and of itself prevented companies or whomever from wanting to sponsor us. And I know my thoughts then were, if that's that big a problem for you, then maybe we don't want you to be involved. Um, but then, to fast forward a little bit, they did eventually change the name. Um, but it wasn't without a fight and lots of discussions between the different organizations. But to Dr. Christian's point, you don't change what you're doing, um, even if you adjust something to make it, maybe what may be perceived to be a little more effective in words. Um, Do have one other question in here for the panel. So from each of your perspectives, how can we engage or re-engage others from different areas of pharmacy, excuse me, who may not initially see a connection to stay connected to our organization? So I don't know, this is the transition from SNPhA to NPhA, or just professionals who may have been engaged at one point but are no longer really that involved.
I can start off.
Yeah.
Go on, start off, Robbie.
Okay. So to get people who were engaged to re-engage, I think it really is going to just take a smiling face, a friendly person to ask them why they stopped being involved, and then, kind of taking heed to whatever that is. Maybe it's something that we could have done better. Maybe they just had a busy life, but just outreach and reaching out, I think is very important. I think one of the things that we're doing is showing up more on social media. We've been doing excellent. I feel like every day there's something to do with NPhA, and making sure we have that program, and so people can feel like there's growth when they're part of the organization. Another thing we've been doing, or we just started, is wearing our pins every first Monday of the month. So then people can ask questions. What is this organization about if they have never been engaged and wanting to be a part of something so great? So I think those are a few ways to do it. With students, it should be easy with the website transition, just seeing when they graduate and sending out a simple email saying you have a free year. Especially if they were a part of SNPhA. Now, there are some people who were not a part of SNPhA who found out about NPhA, and then we would have to be more creative and invited them to our national conventions, et cetera. I know last year we had sent out postcards to everyone who was in the area to make sure people knew about what we had to offer. So I think just continuing outreach and letting people know what NPhA has to offer and how we're different. And when they come and they see it, like it's a signed, sealed, and delivered thing, right? It's a great environment, that people are real, like you just can't stop smiling and talking about how wonderful it is. Even our sponsors, they're like, this is like my favorite organization to sponsor. Like we love coming here, we love doing this work, and we just love them being a part too and helping sponsor the goals that we have. So I think we have everything it takes to do the job, just getting the word out there on what we are standing for.
And just to piggyback on what Dr. Christian has said, we just need to listen sometimes to people when they're talking to us. Because sometimes when they're talking to us and they're telling us, well, I had this rough life and I had to stop but drop out, got to help them figure it out, kind of thing. And so I think we need to do active listening. I think that's the current term that people use.
Yeah, I don't have a lot. I don't want to belabor the point. I think Dr. Christian kind of hit it on the head, and Dr. King came around to it, so I agree with both of them.
Thank you, thank you. There is a question, I think, just for historical perspective, and the question is, we talked a little bit about saying minority, whereas before we just said Black, and so kind of maybe if anyone can expound on when that shift happened, if it was just a part of the terminology that was changing through the years, or if it was intentional or strategic at some point um, to use minority.
I can make a comment there, and I'm sure others will have perspective as well. If you go back to the 1970 census, that was one of the first U.S. census that differentiated other than Black and white. And so it gave a lot of credence to the use of the term minority. That was also the time of civil rights. And it was also the time of the pushback from the so-called majority community against civil rights. And so the term majority and minority became more amenable, shall we say. Again, it was a change in nomenclature. It wasn't a change in the actual reality, though. Black folks were still Black folk, and white folk were still white folk. But at that time, white folk included a lot of other people who now are called people of color, such as maybe those who are from some of the Spanish-speaking countries, French-speaking countries, etc. But if you came from a particular country, maybe some of you are not old enough to remember Kid Chocolate. Kid Chocolate was a fighter. Kid Chocolate was as dark as I am. But because he came not from the United States, but came from another country, on his passport, he was labeled white. So I just throw that in there for understanding. The term really is a fluid one. And I think if we insisted that we wish to be called Black or African American, I think it would stick more. Thank you.
Thank you for this. Goodness, squeaking in the background. Somebody's playing upstairs on the toy. It's throwing me off a little bit. Sorry about that. But yeah, so thank you for that perspective and that understanding. And I think, that other theme that was mentioned about, being strategic and adjusting nomenclature, but not changing the purpose and the work, comes through again. Um, And then there was a question about minority, the use of the term minority, increasing benefits to non-melanated or white women. So I think that was one of those shifts as well as we've seen in a lot of the discussions about DEI being so prevalent now, and people not understanding when you use those broader terms, um, sometimes it's an attempt to take away from the push for rights for blacks, for black people in this country and things like that. Um, so we got a comment in here as well. Um, the minority is a product of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. We marched for Black civil rights, but the legislative act broadened the spectrum to minority to include discrimination based on race, color, religion, and national origin. And after that, we just accepted it. So thank you, uh, our president-elect, Mr. Peters, Dr. Peters, for that commentary as well. I think I have tackled all of the questions in here. If anybody else has any, feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat and give a couple of minutes for that to come in there. I don't know who all is looking in the chat, but we do have maybe a clarification on why that question may have been asked. So there's a statement that someone says, I'm newer to the organization, unclear whether our focus is Black people, BIPOC, or any marginalized group. So I think that's where some of that comes from, making sure that NPhA is clear about the focus and about how we are moving and the things that we're doing and who we seek to serve. And then I see Dr. Christian, you came off mute. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I had spoke to the advisors at our quarterly advisor call, and I mean, I made it very clear that the number one beneficiary of what happens in SNPhA is a Black student. Anyone else who can benefit is great, but the focus should be the Black student. And I think in NPhA, the focus should be the Black pharmacist, but not to exclude anyone else. That just should be our focus, making sure that we're not losing that perspective. And, if someone comes in the organization, I think it should be clear, like it's not a Black only organization, but it's an organization that really wants to focus on those who were seen as the most vulnerable, which is the Black student and the Black pharmacist. Um, I'll just say that so I won't get too deep, and I think Dr. McKen's probably wanted to say something because she came on camera.
I saw that as well.
Um,
Madam President,
okay, so good evening, everybody. I'm at a conference in Los Angeles, so I wasn't really trying to get on camera, but and I wasn't really trying to say anything at this point, but I will. Um, I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight. And this has been a very emotional conversation for me personally. I don't know if everybody else is experiencing what I am experiencing, just in terms of just hearing everything. And Dr. King, Dr. Maxwell, and Dr. Christian, from your perspectives, very different time periods, but I think that the message is the same. And I actually feel like Dr. Christian said it best for anybody that is unclear about the current mission of NPhA and SNPhA. It is to support the ideals of other Black and other minority pharmacists and pharmacy students. So I hope that is very clear. And to let everyone on zone 2 and others that are here to know that the our current board of directors has been spending a lot of time just looking at our mission and clarifying or having a lot of discussion about what do we want to be identified as and the implication of that, of being Black and being minority. And our strategic planning session lasted about 6 hours, and I would say 4 of those hours was us talking about, do we identify as Black and identify as minority. And so I think that it is very important that we are clear about what we stand for and that we stand in that, especially in this climate, and be all right with that as well. And be all right with that fact that we may not get certain type of funding, but feel empowered that we can ensure that we have the resources to support ourselves. And so I'm just very, very grateful for everybody's engagement. Thank you, Dr. Brown, for hosting this very, very insightful panel discussion during Black History Month. Black History Month is just like Valentine's Day. If you have somebody that you love, you celebrate Valentine's Day just to say that you love them. But it doesn't mean that you don't love them the whole other 364 days of the year. Black History Month is just for us to be reminded and to be empowered and for us to just feel like we are going to celebrate who we are as a culture and as a people. So we thank you all again for your engagement. I'm very grateful for all of the presidents that have come before me, for those that have laid the foundation for us to be able to build what we're trying to build today. And I thank everybody for their engagement, their input, and their support. So that's it. Thank you.
well, thank you, Dr. McCants. I'm glad you're able to join us and had enough gusto to hop on and share with us as well. Um, we are coming close to the end, and I do want to give Dr. Holland an opportunity. We do have some organizational announcements, but before we get there, if there's any other last minute questions or closing thoughts from Dr. King, Dr. Maxwell, or Dr. Christian, go ahead and open the floor to that and then get our announcements in and say good night.
I would just say, keep on keeping on.
Yeah, I think my big thing is kind of the theme that I really hit on. It's like like everything that we do, like every brick matters. So like it is incumbent upon us to keep building and keep putting those bricks on the house for it to continue to be built up one after another for people behind us.
And I would just say, don't let anything get in the way of your purpose. Don't let the climate get in the way of your purpose. Don't let executive orders get in the way of your purpose. Live it and live it standing straight and tall.
Well, I do want to say thank you all again for speaking for us and sharing. It has been very insightful and for me personally, just well received. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Um, and so, Dr. Holland, I will go ahead and give you the floor if you make the announcement for us.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, Zone 2 panelists, for an awesome evening. There's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good information that was given this evening. So, really much appreciated. To the attendees, I bring you greetings from the House of Delegates. I'm Corey Holland, the Speaker of the House. I just want to be really briefly and invite you all to serve as delegates for this year's House. The sign up has gone out. Check your emails. We would love to have you. I think Zone 2 is already leading the way. I think it has about 3 delegates signed up so far. Need more. You can have up to 10. So we're looking for about seven more members from Zone 2 and anyone from the other zones as well that are in attendance to sign up and be and represent your zone, represent your your community, your profession, your city, all of that in our 2025 House of Delegates. And so I look forward to serving with you all and seeing you there at conventions. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you. And for those of you who aren't aware, the House of Delegates, that's where um the organization's members get an opportunity to say this is how we want to do things, or these are the things we want to do in terms of resolutions and bylaws. Um, so it is very, very important. That is how the organizational changes, as far as the foundation, a lot of them are made through the House of Delegates. Um, and then I'll just share a couple of dates. Coming up, other events. Next Tuesday, from literacy to legacy, a financial empowerment webinar hosted by the New Practitioner Network. And then there is a research seminar series. So dates will be February 26th, March 12th, and March 19th. So that is a 3-part series. So if you know somebody interested in research, there's a seminar being put together to help in that area. And then our March Power Hour will be Sunday, March 23rd. And the topic for that one is resilience in landing a full-time role. Other dates, if you are interested in being a CE speaker for the annual convention in August, the call for proposals is out and will close this Saturday, the 15th. And save the date for our annual meeting, August 1st through 4th. And our interim executive vice president has put the link in the chat for registration for the events. It's npha.net /events. So that link is in there if you want to sign up, register for any of those events that were mentioned or any others that are coming up that may be listed in the future. There is also a link to join if you are not a member. And our president, Dr. McCants, has been recognizing some of the other board directors. Our president-elect is on here, Rick Peters. We've got the Zone 1 director, Dr. Adrian Simmons, joining us from somewhere out the country. And let's see, I'm probably going to miss some people.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Zone 3, I'm looking through to Zone 3 Director Ariel Williams. We have several committee chairs and co-chairs on: Sudan Gordon, Diamond Donaldson. Of course, we heard from the Speaker of the House, Dr. Corey Holland, and also our Secretary, Elisha Ross. And I do want to take a moment to acknowledge longtime board member in the past, Dr. Tricia Shaw. And so if you are, and our current president of SNPhA is also on the line, Dr. Tajay Turner. Just a few others. We have past chapter presidents, a lot of people on here, Kyla Leon, Megan Brown. So all of you, Lynn Am, previous Zone 1 director. So we thank you all so much for your leadership. Dr. Walleen Bullard, committee chair. So thank you all so much. If I didn't say your name, please charge it to my heart. But thank you all for leadership, for your support.
Thank you so very much. And yes, and Terrence Burrows, our
Lord, excuse
foundation
me.
president.
Yes, I
It's
had to
hard
come back on. Let me come back on. Dr. Terrence Burrows, current foundation president, who is leading probably the largest endowment that is available. I would venture out to say the largest endowment available for pharmacy students right now at over $600,000, if I even have that correct. Terrence Burrows, thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, and real quick, thank you, Madam President, SNPhA President, for the SNPhA regional conferences. Regions 1 and 2 will be in Philly in March, and 3, 4, and 5 are in, I don't have it in front of me. They're in Ohio, in Columbus, if I'm not mistaken. I got that right, Dr. Christian?
Yeah, Columbus, Ohio is going to be the 21st and 22nd of this month. So if you
Yes,
didn't register, but you made it to this call, reach out to Tajay and we'll make sure we can get you registered.
yes, and they do need for both conferences, even if you are not an attendee, they do offer CE for pharmacists, accredited CE. But if you are not attendee and are in that area or no pharmacists in the area, they do need judges for the clinical skills competitions that do not require registering for the events. Well, I will say thank you again for everyone for coming on, to our speakers. Thank you so very much for sharing with us this evening, and for your time and engagement, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your night.